Planet Matters. I am moderating the panel Land Matters in my function as the co-curator of the exhibition Land for Us All that was shown here at the Architekturzentrum Wien from December 2020 to July 2021, and co-author of the publication with the same name. We looked at the topic of the escalating consumption of land, both in the quantitative and qualitative way, with the viewpoints of architecture and planning. We had a strong focus on Austria and examined and tried to explain the historically grown mechanisms that lead to the spiraling destruction of land, be they related to the tax system, the planning system, or the economic imbalances. We looked at the possible changes to the established systems, sometimes quite small changes, that could turn the development around, and we also looked at international examples of projects that are beginning to do just that, and could act as catalysts for change. It is still possible to see a small excerpt of Land for Us All featured in the exhibition Climate Care, part of the Vienna Biennale for Change at the MAC. Today's panel, Land Matters, was curated in collaboration with Bettina Leidl, director at the Kunsthaus Wien, as well as Verena Kasper-Eisert, curator at the Kunsthaus Wien. There, presently, the fantastic exhibition Landscape Painting of the artist Ines Dujak is being shown. And that deals with related subjects such as the classification of and naming of plants shaped by colonization, as well as past and present acts of land grabbing. In the Land Matters panel, we want to explore the land issue in the context of the climate crisis, food security, international politics, and colonialism. We will hear 3 lectures covering the spectrum from an international research platform on agricultural land grabbing to a photographic documentary on the company Monsanto, to an exhibition showing strong artistic positions on soil, plants, agriculture, and past, as well as neo-colonial tendencies in relation to them. The panel's participants are an art historian and curator, an artist, and an environmentalist. For the discussion, we will be joined by an economist, and me as an architect and curator will chair the panel. Apart from being a challenge for me as a chair, I hope that this multidisciplinary discussion will bring us forward in trying to answer the following questions. How can science, art, and activism together increase awareness of the significant value of the finite resource of land and soil on the world's environmental and social balance? What is the role that land and our handling of it play in safeguarding a climate-friendly future? How can we unmask neo-colonial tendencies in relation to land ownership, and agriculture? Let us try with this discussion to achieve a cross-pollination between the disciplines, different disciplines that are all caring for soil. I will now invite the first speaker to the podium who will join us online from Berlin. She should be here in a moment. Maybe I'm not an audio yet. Hello, Elena, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Should I turn the camera on?
Yes, please, you can turn the camera on. Thank you. Hi, welcome.
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you. So you already introduced me, or?
No, not yet. I will introduce you now. I just introduced the general panel. Mm-hmm. So I will introduce you as our first speaker. This is Elena Aguirdo.
Not now online. We are. Okay.
This is Elena Aguirdo. She's a Berlin-based art historian and curator. She studied art history at the University of Venice, Ca' Foscari, and in 2010 she received a PhD in contemporary art and design. Since 2013, she has been artistic co-director of Savvy Contemporary, the laboratory of form ideas, which is an arts-based base in Berlin. There she curates and co-curates exhibitions, discursive programs and series. She's also artistic director of the non-profit Association of Neuroaesthetics, Platform for Art and Neuroscience, which is a project in collaboration with the Medical University Charité and the School of Mind and Brain of the Humboldt University, encouraging both a dialogue and lasting cooperation between contemporary art and the cognitive sciences. Since 2017, she has been teaching at the Weißensee School of Art in Berlin. She had a guest professorship at the Kunsthochschule für Bildende Künste in Hamburg and was resident fellow at Helsinki University of the Arts. Today she will talk about the exhibition Soil is an Inscribed Body on Sovereignty and Agropoetics, which she curated together with Marlene Boschen for Savvy Contemporary in 2019. Thanks for joining us. Feel free to share your screen if you have a presentation, and we are very much looking forward to hearing about the project.
Okay, thank you so much for this quite formal introduction. You're seeing the screen?
Yes, we're seeing.
But maybe you're viewing it, aspetta, I'm at slideshow, like that.
Yes, perfect.
Good. Great, so it's also nice that you're seeing me smaller, so I don't feel too stressed about a huge image of me on a big screen. So, good afternoon. Thank you for the introduction. I'm very happy to join this important conference, even if sadly just from Berlin, remotely. At least I have to say the carbon footprint that I'm producing is not too invasive and makes me feel not too bad about that. Also, the fact that I'm engaging in a conversation with you from Berlin allows me not to delegate my care work as mother to someone else. And I think at the end, I'm making sense of it. I'm sad that I can't be with you, but this economy of energies is probably not the worst thing. So as it was mentioned, my name is Elena Aguilera. I'm an art historian. I'm a curator, and since 2013, I am co-artistic director at the independent art space Savvy Contemporary. A space founded and directed by Bonaventure Ndikung since 2009, when it was founded. Before getting into the exhibition, the project on agropoetics, I would like to make a short introduction about my curatorial practice. So central to my practice as curator is the important operation of questioning the role of the curatorial and of doing it from the porous space of the within and the outside. So from inside the institution and the museum, because Savvy is somehow a para-institutional. It's not institutional, but it is institutional. And this possibility also to be anti and ante, as Fred Moten and Stefano Harni are talking about. It's for me an interesting space that allows us to go beyond sterile exercises of institutional critique, and instead of really challenging the infrastructures and cracking with them. I work as an independent curator, or better said, to use a phrasing that some colleagues of mine are using, and in particular, I want to mention Natasha Petresin-Bachiles, that you might know. I'm an interdependent curator. I'm especially active at Savvy, a space that is not representing the institutional, as I was saying, but that is interested in cracking with dominant epistemologies and power structures. And I would like to say also that is interested in putting care and repair at the center of our practice. In fact, care is maybe something that comes also about when talking about this project on agropoetic, and also a practice that puts listening at the center, listening to be able to then curate in a polyphonic, choral way that is based on sympoiesis and making with, rather than autopoiesis and self-making. I have to say this is always the way in which I curate, but in particular for this project, I really think that this aggregation of subjectivities came together as a one in a choral polyphonical form in a quite beautiful way. So many other projects that allowed me to navigate this space of repair, and the project that brought me to question the way in which we curators, the artwork, are complicit with this system of extraction that we all try to challenge, at least in our theory, but also there is questioning the way we are working together, the way we are thinking infrastructurally to analyze the way we perform our labor and the kind of institution that we want to become and to enact. One that puts care work at the center and sees it as its main commons. One that counters the imperatives of late capitalism and neoliberal progress-driven modes of living and thinking, and actually enable accountability instead, and that thinks about institutional ethics, teamwork methods, internal diversity politics, for repeatedly redefining who the institution intends to address. So, yes, this was actually an image to talk about this conviviality, the way in which we work, and you can see some colleagues there. Strangely, in this photo, they are all men, but I can tell you we are more women. So, yes, Soil is an Inscribed Body on Sovereignty and Agropoetics was the title of this exhibition I've been invited to talk about in this conference. And I would like to say that this, as I mentioned, is one of these projects that allowed us to really focus on questions of repair, because the fundamental considerations that we did on the soil, on land, as the witness and subjects of man-made erosion, depletion, destruction, also allowed us to think about possibilities of regeneration, of collective care. So I'm leaving just images on the background that are probably, yes, opening up to other poetic spaces. And this, for example, is a poem, like 2 lines of a poem by Amilcar Cabral. I'm going to explain you why Amilcar Cabral is crucial to this project, but it starts saying, the land now, it is the storm becalmed. So soil was and is and remains a space of struggle and conflict. Globally, the devastation of landscapes, consumption and exhaustion of natural resources, vanishing of species and ecosystems, the proliferation of wars and cultural genocides have left their marks on the land, in the soil for centuries. But yet, local communities across geographies and spaces have been and are experimented with forms of collectivization and autonomy as rejections of the capitalist and colonial model of agriculture. Most of the discourses around the violence of the anthropogenic land use that raised in the past decades, all the discussions also about the Anthropocene, actually failed a bit or did not take into account too much the deep interconnections of patriarchal, racial, and neo-colonial patterns of extraction and destruction of life worlds. So the project I'm going to show you materialize with a series of readings, workshops, with an exhibition, and also finally with a publication that I actually invite you to download because it's open access. You can find it on our website and also on the website of TIR that co-produced this reader with us. So with the project, we were really asking, can we read some of the current experiments that merge agrarian tradition of self-sufficiency, contemporary art, and ecological practices as heuristic systems of knowledge production and sharing? Again, we were asking, what does a decolonial, more than human sensitivity challenge and make possible when bringing together practices of cultivation and liberation? And I would like to insist really on this relationship between cultivation and struggle for liberation. So the project focused on both anti-colonial and the historical anti-colonial and the current anti-extractivist struggles and resistance against the agribusiness. It took you from the figure of Amilcar Cabral. I was reading you before this 2 lines of his poem, and its double agency as an agronomist and as a liberation fighter in Guinea-Bissau. I don't know if you're familiar with the figure, but we actually worked around the figure of Cabral together with Philippa Cesar, and you're seeing in this image that I'm showing the installation she did at Xavi, and bringing to the fore this reflection that she did on what she called the agropoetics of liberation that Cabral did, to reflect on how political theory has been and can be informed and subverted by agricultural practice. We actually then contextualized it in the present. We were thinking also about what was happening in those months in Sudan, and with the ideas of reforming agriculture and how often a revolution starts from the land and from the soil, exactly. But just to make a little parenthesis on Cabral, for the ones that are not informed about his life and his figure, Cabral is most known as the leader and the Secretary General of the African Party for the Independence of Guinea and Cabo Verde Islands. And he was assassinated by the Portuguese agents in 1973. What was central to this exhibition was actually reading Cabral's practice as an agronomist that was working initially for the Portuguese academy and a scientific apparatus, as a strategy, of course, a resistance and subversive strategy that then germinated in a political formation and militancy. And to quote him really with his words, to advance the liberation struggle from inside, using colonial resources to inform and strengthen the liberation movement. So in some way, using the master's tools to destroy the master's house. What you're seeing in this, maybe here it was more easy to see, what you're seeing in this image is exactly this understanding of the struggle as a centrifugal movement that starts from within and then expands, and it's a completely it's a military strategy, but also an agricultural one. So by engaging with this work, we asked how Cabral studies, writing and fights and reflection on the epistemology of the soil can enlighten the current struggles against monoculture, land grabbing, and neo-colonial extraction across the globe. Of course, it's not that we had answers. We were posing mainly question and complicating the issue by listening to the many perspectives that we invited to join, and polyvocally, as I mentioned, bringing it into a chorus. So for that, I would like to show a couple of images that are accompanying you through the exhibition that we installed, and guide you through the narrative that we built. So with the project, we reflected on the possibility of care and solidarity, especially that feminist practices and communities have been and are experimenting nowadays. As Maria Puig de la Bella Casa suggests, against less ecological and uncritical modes, we seek to engage with reflection about the disruptive pace of care, reconsidering anthropogenic notions of care and understanding the fundamental collaboration of many agents, and agents, it means not just humans, and communities as the real living web of care circulating in and constituting the natural work. Our project on agropoetics engaged not only with the question of sovereignty and land rights and with the concept of agropoetics, but also with some of the fundamental threats and preoccupation of some feminist decolonial researches, namely the possibility of challenging the presumed universality of the scientific discourse and problematizing and undoing its racist, patriarchal, Western-centered and individualistic agenda and infrastructure, to then unravel disruptive narratives on forms of care and community engagement. Thinking agropoetically became, in fact, in some way, an opportunity of manifesting healing and repair in the face of environmental, patriarchal violence, and as a possibility of weaponizing agriculture. Soil as the earth's vulnerable skin, so as a skin of the earth, in fact, is holding a geotrauma, is carrying the trauma of all the devastation that it lived, but is also pointing to the possibility of collective care, healing, and living. Talking about soil epistemologies makes urgent and impossible not to take into account movements for social change. When dealing with care, whether agricultural or curatorial, one needs to be sensitive to how this is embedded in the control of knowledges, that which can be said, done, and the way in which it is said and done. Maria Puig de la Bella Casa suggests that, and I quote, scientific knowledge about soil is not just used, but may well be produced by movements for social change in a quest to transform ecological relationship between different beings sharing the earth. It's this planetary habitability of which people like Achille Mbembe are talking about too, no? So what does a decolonial, more than human sensitivity challenge and make possible when bringing together practices of cultivation and liberation? In the show, we've been drawing on a more historical, but also as well as contemporary examples to question how entangled anti-colonial and environmental alliances are nurturing each other, and how we can transform ruins, colonial erosion, damaged landscapes, and take up tactics of precarity to make living possible despite economic and ecological ruination. So to do that, I am now really guiding you through the show, and this is the corridor that was bringing you to the space of Savi. Actually, this is our old space because in August 2020, we moved into a very different space, not far away from there, but yes, the show was 2019, so before our move. So, and the piece was opening with an invocation to water in some way, and rain, because soil is not, cannot live without water. So, but also was bringing us to think about cultivation, not only as something inscribed in the body, but as cultivation of cultural objects and carriers of rituals. What you're seeing in this image is a sound installation. I cannot play the sound, otherwise it's going to be too exciting and you want to listen to it for too long and we don't have the time. So I show you just these images that were transcribing some of the words chanted in the sound installation by Dina Amro, whose title is "Time Flows in All Directions, Water Flows Through Me." So the installation was performing Palestinian songs that were chanted for decades and centuries to summon rain in context where now water, of course, water resources are not very much available and that are controlled and cut by the Israeli government. So for us, this was a good way to enter and problematize not only the fact that, yes, when we're talking about anti-colonial, it's a struggle that is still to be performed nowadays for some communities, but also because of this understanding of the soil as a carrier of rituals. Another work that you were encountering immediately is a work of Elena Aguilera, an exhibition pondering on sugar and its history, and that was immediately bringing us into narratives of material extraction, slavery, and exploitation, and making evident the geographical divide between a world of raw materials, cheap labor, trading companies, and consumption. The artist conducted research in Indonesia, where she's originally from, exploring the patterns of exploitation of the palm oil industry and the land grabbing politics performed by local government through foreign investment. Agrarian law and coloniality, in fact, as she was showing and realized, are inherently linked in Indonesia and are translated into arbitrary and unclear situations, allowing opaqueness and a perverse liaison between corporations, multinationals, and politicians and local speculators. So I just want to quote two words by Elena Aguilera, who was saying to us, mostly the foreign investment was stimulated by the spectacle of colonial fantasies of conquest and discovery, including risk, virility, and violence. This fantastic or spectacular form of investment, transnational in nature, in turn colluded with Indonesian corrupt government practices, mostly in the time of New Order, 66 to 98, under the term of developing the country. So, of course, the exhibition reflected in many ways on coloniality. The interesting thing is that this sugar was in the duration of the exhibition melting and showing also how material resources are somehow disappearing.
Elena?
Yes?
I'm very sorry. Could you try to wrap up? Because we unfortunately have to be extremely strict with the schedule since we have a lot of people coming in online.
So I can just guide you through the exhibition. Maybe I don't even have the time, but you can have impressions. This was a work by Pedro Neves Marquez. This was Chorus of Soil by Binta Diao. This video was a very, very impressive film by Lerato Shadi, in which she was eating earth to remember the practice of slaves that to liberate themselves were doing this geophagy, to suicide and to set themselves free. Or the work of Cedric Nunn, Unsettled, talking about the resistance of the Xhosa people. The Trummelberg by Leone Contini, Uriel Urlo. Other historical examples, again now the struggles of women, Amazonian women that are fighting for liberation. Here it was about Monsanto and Bayer, because we were actually, the show, our space was a couple of kilometers far from the factory of Bayer in Berlin. And then this amazing project by Bouba Touré that was recounting the story of this experiment in Mali, an amazing agroecological project in Soumakou Kouré. It's too long to explain you what it is. This Kaban by Hervé Yamguen, a project on fermentation by Zayan Khan, and a lot of books on a table by Luis Berrios Negron. Maybe to conclude, I can mention that through the development of the project, we tried to learn from an ecology of practices of cultivation to reroute and reground questions of sovereignty and land rights. Understanding and witnessing the practical care and the intimate relations of cultivation towards sovereignty was crucial to go beyond just theoretical epistemologies. So I just mentioned a couple of workshops that we did because they were very essential for the developing of the project. This was in Morocco, a workshop called Seed as Relation, in collaboration with the artist Hassan Darsi. And we learned about practices of agroecological gardens in a village in Benzliman outside of Casablanca, but also learning from the farmers that were resisting large-scale quarries that were threatening the villages and wanting to grab the land by, of course, buying that, but for very little. Or another very, very fundamental moment was with these conventions of women farmers, of a feminist convention, obviously, where here in Poland, under the direction of Marwa Arsanios, an artist, we took part in a convention exchanging knowledge, stories, materials of soil transformation with women farmers from across the whole world, and most of them were indigenous. They were really talking to us about experiences of practice, autonomy, and self-sufficiency. So the defense of, I'm getting at the end, the defense of sovereignty, land rights, the commons, and the broader struggle over natural resources emerged as a common thread across these initiatives, as well as many others within the wider ecologies of practices. Among them, we conversed with many different groups. So one was the Garifuna, the Black Fraternal Organization in Honduras, the Jinvar village in Rojava in northern Syria, Sakia in Palestine, Inland in Spain, the Foodscape Collective in Singapore, the Asociação para Desenvolvimento Integral da Mulher in Guinea-Bissau. Many connections that then we also managed to bring together, building a Telegram group, so where people were talking in many different languages to each other to share tactics and strategies and to stand up together. So yes, I hope I managed to wrap it up, and sorry if it was a bit too long.
Thank you so much. That doesn't matter at all, and I think we will have the opportunity to get back to that topic of the collaborations later on in the discussion. And a couple of the projects that you mentioned, they will also resound in the other lectures, which one is about Monsanto and the other one is about large-scale land grabbing in the Ukraine. Thank you so much. I think it's... I'm very sorry I missed that exhibition. I already downloaded the reader and I've started getting into that.
We have also a printed version, but actually it's very beautiful to just have also one online.
Thank you. We will now move on to Matthias Asla, who has already entered the waiting room. I'm letting him enter now. Wait.
I silence myself and I also get...
Okay. Hello.
Hello.
Hello, welcome. Can well, you can hear me. You can see me?
Yes, I can hear you. I can see you.
We can see you. I will change the view. Do you want to do it, actually? Hello. I would like to introduce as our next speaker Matthias Asla, who's an artist who works and lives in Arles in France. He began his career working on film productions in Caracas, Venezuela, but shaped his photographic practice in the United States. He holds a master's degree from the École nationale supérieure de la photo in Arles, and his work mainly consists of long-term investigative documentary projects. His latest book, Monsanto, A Photographic Investigation, was published in 2017 and received international acclaim, winning several photo book awards. Amongst the recent venues where his work was shown are Les Rencontres d'Arles in France, the Photographers Gallery in London, the Fotomuseum Antwerp in Belgium, and the European Parliament in Strasbourg. He will today present the project Monsanto, a photographic investigation, to us. Yes. Feel free to share your screen. We're listening.
Sure. Thank you very much. Thank you for this invitation. I was exhibit in the festival a couple years ago, so I'm glad to be back. I want to, of course, talk about the book of Monsanto, about the project. I think, let me close the window so like that to avoid any weird sound. So I would like to start with the idea. I mean, what is the project about? The project is 5 years work of photography, but at the same time, a lot of time invested on research to try to understand, of course, the subject, and most important, to try to understand how to put the subject together. And one of the biggest motivations, of course, is always the first time is the outrage about this big multinational. Monsanto, for the people who doesn't know, is today it was bought by Bayer, so today it belongs to Bayer. So it's an agricultural chemical a company. Their main business is products for the agro industry. Their best known products are Roundup and genetically modified seeds. Genetically modified seeds that work together with all this line of products they have. Is a little bit, today agriculture is a little bit like an iPhone. You buy the iPhone, but you need to buy also the phone line, and you need to buy the case to protect it, and you need to buy, etc., etc., etc. So this is the way this new huge agricultural conglomerate see agriculture at a big scale. So as I was saying at the beginning, of course, the motivation to do this work and spend 5 years on it is come from outrage. Is why this is happening, why a company like this is still doing business, and most important, why a company like this hasn't been punished in the real sense. Of course, Monsanto have paid lawsuits all these years, and especially in the last few years, it's been hit very hard with lawsuits related to their product Roundup and the cancer that that some people got by using their product. Today, Monsanto has more than 13,000 lawsuits waiting. Last year or 2 years ago, Bayer decided to put 10 billion with a B euros for a future lawsuit. So you can see the big problem that Monsanto is generating to Bayer right now. So I will start, of course, talking about a little bit. I'm going to share my screen. It's always tricky. So I'm going to share the second one. Share, perfect. So can you see here? Okay. So I want to show you a little bit the timeline of the project. This is Photoshop. This is not what I wanted. I'm sorry. This is always so let's open this with preview. Perfect. So I will start from the beginning of the project. So all this is, of course, me getting ready. I shot all the project on film, a large format 4x5 and a medium format 6x7. And I travel all around the United States for all these 5 years, actually more like 3 years, 4 years. I spent a year and a half on research before I started traveling, photographing all these places kind of lost in the United States, in Idaho, but also in the south of the United States. As you can see, I travel alone most of the time and to meet the people and the places I need to photograph. I work a lot with archivals. Here I'm in the University of Columbia in Illinois, not in New York, photographing archivals that I use in the book. I will show you that later. This is again me trying to solve problems of representation, of how to do a portrait of the corn and keep, of course, being able not only to see the corn, but to see the place where it is. And so this is the book. This is the dummy of the book, actually. It's okay, you can see it, it's in a good size. So this is the dummy.
Sorry, can you maybe show it full screen? Is it possible?
I'm not full screen. Yeah, let me do that right away. And here. Sorry about that. Okay, and we show it full screen. View, enter full screen.
Yes, that's good.
Perfect. So this is the book, and I think that the book is the best way to show the project. I use, of course, a lot of text. So the books start with a series of publicities I collected during these 5 years. This is our non-retouched original publicity that, of course, I scan and add to the book. So at the beginning of the book, you have a booklet with around 20 of these ads from Monsanto. The ads are from the 30s, 40s, until the 80s, 90s. The idea of that was to have Monsanto talk about themselves through their publicity. So the book is defined in few chapters. Each chapter talks about a specific problem. The idea is that the problem of Monsanto is so big that I needed to find the best examples that can illustrate the history of Monsanto, because otherwise I could do like a Britannica encyclopedia with this work, and it will be a huge book. And so the idea was to keep it focused on which are these problems that can make the people who is looking at the book understand what happened with Monsanto and what is Monsanto about. So I start the first chapter in Anniston, a city that was highly contaminated by PVC produced by Monsanto. Monsanto knew that from the 40s. They were dumping illegally these products on the river, and the consequences of that today is a small city completely contaminated, 10,000 people contaminated, places, land is really a big disaster. So I started the chapter talking about the house of the future of Monsanto. In the 50s, end of the 50s, Monsanto did a project with Disneyland in Anaheim, California. And the idea was to build a house with the materials that Monsanto produced at the time, mostly plastics. And the idea was to show what is the future and what the house of Monsanto looks, the house of the future of Monsanto look. Of course, this is a publicity stunt. The idea is to say we are the future. Monsanto is the future, and this is what we represent, and this is what you need. If you buy our products, you use your products, you are being a part of the future. I start so the story of my work with this picture 50 years, 40 years later, 4,000 kilometers away from this house of the future of Monsanto in Disneyland, showing a house today. This picture was taken in 2012, but showing what is that future that Monsanto promised 50 years ago, and what that future looks today, what it became of that future. And this is one of the houses in this city, one of hundreds of houses that is being abandoned because of contamination of the land. You will see all along my work, I use a lot of archival, I appropriate photography, I use postcards, I use documents that I photograph, and it's important to understand that all this archival material is not less or more important than my photography. I treat them at the same level of my own photography, and they are very important to understand. And they're important because they bring some kind of fact-based research at the same time. This is not just me photographing places, but at the same time, I go and research into archivals and text that is being confirmed, that is being proved, that is a reliable source. So this is the town of Anniston. As you can see, many abandoned business. Of course, the contamination was quite big. We need to understand that happened in the poor side of that town, like in many contaminated places. This is internal documents from Monsanto. were explained very clearly. You can see in your left, in your right, we can afford to lose $1 of business. Our attitude in discussing this subject to our customer will decide the factor. It will be a deciding factor in our success, good luck. So as you can see, money, 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 money first than anything else. So I photograph also, of course, the landscape, but I photograph people, people that are deeply affected by contamination and levels. They have in their bloods very high levels of contaminations, and the consequences of that is a very long list of health problems, from cancer, diabetes, learning problems. So the list is quite huge. Many of the people, at least few of the people I photographed died already, like David here in this picture. This picture, you can see the river. This is the river that was contaminated, the Chocoloco River. For 40 years, they dump waste from PCV, knowing this is how people got contaminated. Many kids used to swim in that river at that time, but also, of course, who talks about water, talk about land and how it permeates the land and contaminates the land. So the important thing about this picture is, as you can see, is red. Of course, the river is not red. It's a picture I paint with acrylic. I allow myself to speculate, but more than speculate, when I was there, there used to be kids at that time. Now they're older. They told me about a memory, and the memory of this river being contaminated, and this river being some days purple, some days red. Of course, this is not a fact. This is a memory. But nonetheless, for me, was important to represent that memory. So this is why I allow myself to paint in my pictures. This next chapter talks about Agent Orange. Agent Orange is a chemical compound that was produced by Monsanto and Dow Chemicals. They discovered it in the 50s, but it really was mass produced in the 60s, and the United States Army used it in the War of Vietnam. Agent Orange is a defoliant, what means that they were sprayed with planes in the Vietnam, in the canopy, in the Vietnam jungle, so all the leaf will die, and the United States Army can see the movement of the Viet Cong, North Vietnamese troops. Actually, at that time, they say that was it was a humanitarian way of doing the war, because they didn't need to bomb blindly. So when the canopy dies, they have a clear vision in the jungle, and they can see very clear where are the troops, the North Vietnamese troops moving. So they can bomb they can be very targeted and not bomb blindly. So for this chapter, I divided in one side the United States, because the chemical was produced in the United States, but not only that, Americans got affected by the production of this product. So for me, it was very important to make that clear. It's not only the Vietnamese that are the victims, even if we need to admit that they are the biggest loser when we talk about Agent Orange, but also people in the United States was affected. So I start photographing the place around the places around where they fabricate this chemical compound. This is in Poca River Basin in West Virginia. So I photograph many of the illegal they dump a lot of residual around the factory, and they hide it. They make big holes in the ground, and they put these big containers with all these residual, we need to understand that the active compound in the Agent Orange is very, very dangerous. We don't know exactly how to get rid of that. So it's not something that you put underground and will disappear in a few years. The consequence of that, of course, is people that live in that place affected by that. The numbers of cancers in that valley where they dump illegally all this substance.
Very sorry to interrupt. I'm very sorry to be so impolite. Yeah. There are 3 minutes left, just so you know.
Okay, good. All these people is being very affected. So at the same time, I talk about, of course, the veteran of the war on Vietnam, especially the children of the veterans of Vietnam that got affected through genetically through their fathers. And the last part of this Agent Orange is, of course, the new generation, third generations of children that their parents or their grandparents got affected by Agent Orange. So you can see it goes generation after generation. The third part of the project talks about a place where they completely irregulated in the United States, so they can put their factory. That talks about, of course, the politics of Monsanto and how much power they have. They can, politically speaking, irregulate things. They can make their own law inside the regulations of the United States. The last part of this project talks about today and specifically the genetically modified seeds and how farmers are losing the right they have on seeds, how seeds don't belong anymore to farmers, but belongs to a corporation. The same thing of a software or many things. So for me, it was very important to meet the people that were lawsuit by Monsanto and wrongly accused of using their seeds illegally. And the last part, I talk about this kind of souvenirs, Monsanto memorabilia. The idea was to put this very banal object and talk about how the banality of Monsanto, but at the same time, how bad it is and how dangerous Monsanto can be. The last part of the book, the last picture of the book is a grid with the people that fights against Monsanto, people like you, like me, everyday people that decide to stop Monsanto. So activists, NGOs, scientists, lawyers. So yeah, this is very quick what is my project about.
Thank you so much for this brief introduction to the book. I will definitely have to get that for our library. It looks fantastic. How many years did you work on this project?
Around 5 years, 6 years. It is. I'm trying to stop the sharing of that.
Okay. We will have one more speaker on this panel who's actually here. So I would like to ask you to stay in this Zoom meeting, but we will not project your image anymore to our wall, but we'll get back to you once we are entering the panel discussion in about 20 minutes' time.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Du kannst die Präsentation schon starten. Ja. As the third and final speaker of this panel, I would like to welcome Mikhailo Omozov, who actually made it to Vienna today, which we're very happy about, and we are grateful that you took into account quite a few bureaucratic tasks around the coronavirus. Mikhailo holds a Master of Geography and Soils and Regulation of Land Resources from the Taras Shevchenko National University in Kiev. He started his career at the National Ecological Center of the Ukraine, where he held the position of a project coordinator. Since 2017, he works for the Center for Environmental Initiatives, Eco-Action, a civil society organization in the Ukraine that unites efforts of experts and activists in the joint struggle to protect the environment. He coordinates the regional focal point of the Land Matrix initiative in Eastern Europe. This Land Matrix is an international collaboration project that builds an open database on international large-scale agricultural investments across low and middle-income countries. This initiative was featured in our exhibition Land for Us All, as well as the catalogue, which I can now show you here, in case you don't know it yet. And he will present this project to us in more detail today. Thank you and welcome.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for inviting me to Vienna to present our work. So I would like to present my organization, Eco-Action. We are working in different directions like climate change, energy transformation, and agriculture as well. And in the agricultural sector, let's say, we are working on land, especially land, and this Land Matrix initiative is helping us to look into land relations and issues in Ukraine and in Eastern Europe region in general. So let's see, Land Matrix initiative, how it started and how it goes now. Land Matrix, it is an independent land monitoring initiative that promotes transparency and accountability in decisions over large-scale land acquisitions in low and middle-income countries by capturing and sharing data about these deals at global, regional, and national level. So this initiative, based not in one place, but it's several, almost 10 different partners. And you can see on this slide that it's organization from Europe, such as CIRAD, GIGA from CIRAD from France, GIGA from Germany. And as you may know, on the beginning of 21st century, there was like big rush for land, and some scientists was interested in this land rush and decided to look more precisely into this process inside and started to collect some data like in spreadsheet, in the Excel in 2009. But then in 2012 they were very successful to get some funds to create better database to monitor land issues around the globe. So, and Eco-Action also is a partner in this initiative, and as I said, we are working in Eastern Europe. So for why to monitor this large-scale land acquisition? So for us, for Land Matrix, large-scale land acquisition is acquisition of land more than 200 hectares. It's really large scale, but also we don't forget about much less land plots, and we are trying to monitor them as well, but more focused on this really large land tracts. So why to monitor? It's like two main reasons for us. It's transparency and accountability, as around land issues, really bad transparency, how these investments in land are happening, are going, etc. What the benefits local communities can get from these investments, what environmental impacts of these investments on the ground. So, and please, you can follow this QR code and see more about these main reasons why to monitor. How we collect data. So this like main bullet points, how we work with this, and for example, our region, Eastern Europe, so without local partners in Eastern Europe, in Africa, in Latin America, in Asia, it was impossible to collect real concrete data on how these investments on land going there. So usually we are working like decentralized team in different regions, which are trying to collect information from government, from local researchers, from local communities, from media, like really agricultural media focused on agriculture topics. So one important point is like that data campaigns in direct countries. If we couldn't get a lot of information from, let's say, from Ukraine in Romania, we are trying to organize, do some networking around NGOs in this region and trying to find local organizations who can help us to understand context in this country and trying to collect information about large-scale land acquisitions there. So what we have already, it's about 1,500 deals on global level. So it's on 2016. This graph is from analytical report based on land metrics data we collected already on this year, and you can see how divided these deals by, or is it concluded, or is it intended deal, failed deal, and yeah, you can see it on the graph. And for now, for 2021, we have more than 2,000 deals on global level, and it's most of them is concluded deals. So it's yeah, concluded deal, and also they are in operation. So you can see on the bottom, this one, that mostly 80% of deals in operation, in active phase of using land. And on this slide, it's about agricultural intentions of land acquisitions. So most of the deals, area of deals, using for growing of food crops and agri-fuels. For example, in Ukraine, Ukraine is typically export-oriented country for food crops, and usually agricultural products are exported to Europe or China. Yeah, it's like main markets for us. Let's go further. So it was for 2016, and now it's for 2021, and you can see that actually nothing changed, especially so food crops still the main reason to invest in land, and yeah, it's very interesting that even livestock not so very popular in intentions. Also, we try and not forget about other intentions. I mean, not only agriculture, but also about forestry. So forestry also is really popular among investors to invest and get some income from this. And as we are in Austria, I'm proposing you to follow one of these QR codes and choose your country, and then you will see one of the deals based in Romania, Ethiopia, or Ukraine. So you can see that Austrian companies are investing in Ethiopia, Romania, and Ukraine, and you can see this square of land under control. So, and so, did you choose your country already? So I would tell more about Ukraine, as I'm from Ukraine. So here you can see the map based on land metrics data, and you can see that all deals located in this like central part of Ukraine, and it's so-called Black Earth Belt, like part of Black Earth Belt. It's really rich soil, and it's easy to get yield, like high-level yield on this area. And investor from Austria control land on this green one, but for now this project closed because of bankruptcy, And very interesting thing that this investor is not Austrian citizen, but it's Ukrainian citizen who registered his company in Austria for tax avoidance in Ukraine. So it like in the shadow. So you can see that investors prefer central part of Ukraine to invest in agriculture. And what about southern Ukraine? It's not very popular. And why do you think? Because of climate change. It is really a risky region in Ukraine to invest in agriculture, and that's why it's not so popular. You should invest even more than usually to build irrigation system and get your money actually. And I would like to show some story we collected from the ground, and it's about zernoprodukt MHP. In English, it's like grain product MHP, and you can follow this QR code also, and it goes directly to the deal. And this is company in Ukraine which has like in central part of Ukraine controls around 100,000 hectares, and it's not direct property, and they are controlling this land through long-term land lease agreements up to 49 years. And this is very interesting company that has interesting structure and also registered on Cyprus for tax avoidance again. And this company engages money from development banks like EBRD, for example, and we are also putting this data about funds to the database. And you can see this on this investor, we call it investor chain, and it's one of the most important part of our database to show who owns exactly this land. And this from another one deal, it's more complicated, even more complicated, investor chain, so you can see how investors organize their structure to be more effective and efficient. It is from another one deal, but let's back to this one. And here you can see the scale of these investments in the central Ukraine. It's Vinnytsia region. And in the center, it is one of the villages, so-called Olyanitsa. And you can see around this small village, it's around 1,000 people, huge facilities of this company. It's like brigades, poultry brigades. It's like huge poultry farm, and here is concrete and fodder plants. So it's a really huge impact, pressure on environment and on local people. That's why it's really important to collect information from the ground and put it to such global initiatives and tell this story to more people. And it's this brigade in more, just zoom in, and you can see how it's huge, and it's around 1.5 million chickens in this brigade, and they are producing like huge massive of manure, and you can see on this photo. So, and all this stuff is surrounding local communities, and they live in these conditions. So, and we are collecting this information from them and trying to communicate these problems to our government as this company gets money, like subsidies from government, and also we are communicating this stories to Europeans, as MHP, this company, is exporting some grains and poultry to EU. So it is important to show us, especially through our database. we hope to not be alone with this initiative, and would like to invite everybody to share their knowledge about large-scale land acquisition and its impacts. So you can easily to contact us and help with information, and or you can use this information for your scientific report, for your research, or any other kind of reports. So that's it. I would like to answer to any questions you have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mikhailo. You can sit down on the last table. Mr. Sinabel, could I ask you to come and join us? Thank you. And while we are waiting for the other two panelists to join us, here is Elena.
Hello.
Hello. Hi. You can hear me? Yes, great. So we are still waiting for Mathieu. Mathieu, can you hear us?
Yes.
Hello, great. So we're complete now. Okay. Wait a second, I'll try to, because this is a new setup now. No, it's all right. Okay. I'm a bit confused because I have 3 views now, but I'm going to try not to look at the screen. We are joined on this panel by Francina Bell, and I would like to start by introducing you. You are senior researcher at the Austrian Institute for Economic Research, the WIFO. Francina Bell works in the field of agriculture and food policy, environmental and resource economics, and risk management. From 2008 to 2012, he was deputy director of the WIFO. He lectures at the University of Vienna and the University of Natural Resources and Applied Life Sciences in Vienna. He is an expert advising the European Commission on the preparation of the annual report on the economic situation of agriculture, and he's a board member of the Austrian Society of Agricultural Economics. I will keep it at that. I think this is the most important part of your impressive CV that you need to know. Thank you again for joining us on this panel, which is perhaps not the kind of panel discussion you would usually join or you usually take part in. This is, as I said in my introduction, a very multidisciplinary panel. So we have an economist, we have an environmentalist and also activist, and we have an artist and an art historian, curator. I think I would like to start with one question, which is maybe start with you, Mr. Sinabel. What did you? How would you react to the 3 lectures we have just heard? Painting a picture that is quite shocking, really, but also apart from your lecture on the Ukraine, not so much touching on Austria. What is the position of Europe, of the European Union's common agricultural policy, especially on the issues of land grabbing, climate change, as well as also genetically manipulated seeds and patenting of them?
Yeah, thank you. I'm trying to be not too long and maybe add one thing concerning my background. I'm an applied economist, so I'm working in order to understand what is going on, and I'm not that type of economist who knows how people should be and what is the best policy and how consumers should behave. And in order to understand what is going on, I usually differentiate three groups of people or forces in our society. We have the consumers, and the consumers can make very good informed choices about the products they're buying and consuming. And the information we got today, I think, is very good in informing people to make better choices. For instance, to buy organic products or to look at the labels where products are coming from in order not to support activities that have been shown, and I think most of the people would like not to have around in the world. Apart from the consumers, we have the producers, and when it comes to producers in agriculture, we need to differentiate between two groups. The one are the farmers, and the farmers in many cases are not the owners of land, but are affected by land grabbing or they do not have the resources to buy the land because investors who are interested in rendite are grabbing the land, and farmers eventually end up working for them. So this is one group of producers, and the second ones have been shown here as well. It's the input suppliers that produce chemicals in order to enhance productivity, but eventually to make profits. And we have landowners who are interested in profits on land. They are not so much interested in what is done with the land. In many cases, land is just bought and let fallow. Nothing is happening, in the hope that 5 years later another investor will come and pay double the price. That's the producers, and then we come to the third agent in this game, and this is policymakers. We are all affected by policymakers, and we are in a lucky situation because we live in a democracy, and the initiative you are just pushing right now is contributing to forming the ways policies are made. And I look at these things from the European angle. I'm not so well informed about what is going on in the rest of the world, but only one point. Biofuels were mentioned a few times in this session, and the negative aspects of these policies have become mainstream already 10 years ago. And how does policy react? In the EU, policy reacts the way that first generation biofuels, the one that we were talking about, are now abandoned, and we're now moving into second generation biofuels. But what we see is the land grabbing now switches from agricultural land to forest land, and forest land is the input for second generation biofuels. So society is learning and adapting. Policy is struggling to find new ways. But what I see is it's environmentalists, the civil society, and art that is 2 steps ahead of what is implemented in policies.
Thank you for that question, which brings me immediately to the next question. I think it's very nice that this is kind of almost admitted. It's a nice way to put it, that we are 2 steps ahead of the policy. Could I ask all 3 speakers of today that looking back at their projects and the problems that they have come across and the things that need to be changed, what would your input be for policy makers? What would your demands be from the policy side regarding the treatment of land and soil and plants and people? Maybe we start with Elena, is that okay?
Can you hear me?
Yes, now we can hear you. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, what we did with the exhibition would be exactly what I would convey and say to the policymakers. All this extraction, all these careless politics are really not taken in consideration. The damage that is done towards communities, towards people, towards more than human agencies. And the policymakers should not only listen to what these people have to say, as we, for example, also did in our project by putting their voice at other communities at the center, but really should invite them to become the policymakers. Because oftentimes there is this arrogance of knowing, saying in a paternalistic way what certain communities should do to protect their land from grabbing, what the strategies they should develop. But obviously they have strategies. They're just that they are always being repressed, silenced, and left aside. So my invitation would be really very straightforward about bringing these people in the discussion, because all these activists, we also saw many of these figures in Latin America, also on the African continent, all these figures of, and often women activists that are standing up and are becoming mediatic forces. At the end, they maybe receive prizes, people are celebrating them with projects, but then they never get to the position in which they can really change things, the legal systems and the real policies, as you're saying. So I don't know if this is an enough clear answer, but yeah, that's what I would propose.
Thank you, that's a very good input. Mathieu, can I pass the same question on to you? What would your demands be for the policymakers?
You're muted.
Great, I'm sorry about that. So this is a tricky question, and I want to be as much respectful as possible with policymakers, because I think that they have a very good, a very important work, and it's this bridge between the field and whatever is that field, and of course the politicians. Now, what is interesting to know is that we need to understand that today, as we see it, corporations, and it's important that I talk about corporations, because I think corporations are in the heart, in the core of the problematic. I think at first, we need to understand that any change, ecologically speaking, or even socially, it won't happen if we let this in the hands of corporations. The idea that corporations are becoming greener and this is all is not true. Is a distortion of the reality. Yes, they are becoming, but actually what is happening is that corporations today are trying to make the changes, the urgent changes, that this is not me that say it or a theory of conspiracy. Scientists agree. We are in a big mess. We have a very specific timing that we need to fulfill. After that, they don't say that everything will collapse, but they say we have big possibilities of not being able to come back. So, knowing this, we need to understand that corporations today, what they're doing, the changes they're doing is changes as slow as possible to keep the status quo that exists today. That means business as usual. So any change of any corporation today is not a real change. It's just a change so we don't change the things that need to be changed for things to get better. So this is very important to understand, and I go back to the policymakers, because I'm not sure policymakers today understand that completely. I think many of the policies we're changing today are more related to fit corporations and their need to keep this craziness that we have today, more than really find solutions, because the real solutions, we won't find it in Brussels, we won't find it in Exxon, we will find it in the places that are really affected and the people that are really affected. So for me, and to summarize what I'm saying, I think the most important thing right now for policymakers is, and I'm not saying that they don't do it, but I think they need to be more radical on this. Stop listening to the bureaucracy of capitalists and corporations and start listening really to what is happening today. For example, and to finish what I'm going to say, this example can illustrate it very well. All the story of the carbon footprint, for example, was developed by a calm British company that worked for British Petroleum. And the idea was very simple, to shift the responsibility of industries to each one of the people. Because it's easy if each one of the people say, oh, I need to take responsibility, than if we say corporations need to take responsibility. So, and the other thing is the choice the public has to choose this or that. This is not true. This is a very sketchy way of seeing, yeah, but the public can decide to buy bio. It's not true. You have a big percentage of people that cannot afford bio to start. They cannot eat like that every day because they don't have money to pay the rent. So they need to buy. The question is not why people is not buying bio. The question is why companies are producing processed food and why not more are being done to stop this. So I hope this answered the question and what I think policymakers should focus on.
Thank you, Mathieu. There is a reaction from the audience. I would like to now ask this question to you before we can perhaps discuss the input in common.
Thank you. It is very good question, especially in case of Ukraine, as Ukraine is not part of EU, so we have kind of different reality in land relationships. So as for eco-action and work with policymakers, we are trying to bring these cases I mentioned about local communities. It's like case, like proof that you should change policy, environmental policy, like environmental control, environmental standards in Ukraine. Also, we are pushing this idea that you should support local farmers, not these subsidies should go not to agro-holdings, we call it agro-holdings, not to big agribusiness, but to local small and medium farmers. Yeah, but it's quite difficult to do because actually this agribusiness has their representatives in national parliament and in government, so it's quite difficult to communicate with them. But thanks to EU, actually, we have an association agreement with the European Union, and we are trying to use these instruments we have regarding this association. For example, how quick we should implement environmental standards in Ukraine, especially in agriculture, and yeah, sure, for sure in any other sector as well, but especially in agriculture, first of all, because Ukrainian policymakers don't see these links between agriculture and its impacts on environment and especially on climate change. So yeah, something like that.
I can sense that you would like to answer to the input we just got. Is that correct? Yeah, you.
Me, yeah. I think this is a really interesting discussion. We saw on the pictures the heaps of manure from the chicken fabrics. And 2 years ago, there was a big uproar in whole Europe, not Ukraine, the European part of Europe, because lots of chicken meat was imported to the EU, and the farmers in the EU said, okay, look, we have the European environmental standards, we have to abide by them, our production costs are twice of that in the Ukraine, and they can export poultry meat to the European market, and we cannot compete with that. The reason is because our environmental standards are much higher. The rationale of the EU was to say, okay, we want to have a strong partner on our eastern partner, and stimulating agricultural production and opening the market so that they can not only depend on aids we're sending to the Ukraine, but they can also sell their products to the EU. That's our rationale. And when I listen to Mathieu, I think he has a very good point. My point was the consumers have the choice. They can buy Ukrainian poultry, they can buy organic poultry, they can buy poultry from Austria, or they can decide, no, I do not eat poultry, I eat, I get my protein from soya beans, and I do not want to have any animals killed. Mathieu said, no, it should be regulated at the policy level, so not environmental friendly production methods must be outruled. And I think this is the mess we are in, or it's the situation we are in. We have many choices, and to be honest, I do not have the right answer. I just see the various developments and finding what is the best way. For me at least, I try to do the best what I can, but to know that real answer, the one that solves all the problems, I did not yet find.
Nobody has yet.
It was again about the same company actually. The photos I showed is the same company you mentioned about import to EU, and yeah, it's really cheap to produce poultry meat in Ukraine and just export to everywhere you want. So yeah. And also I would like to mention about this photo project by Matthias, and we also tried to do something like that in Ukraine, around Ukraine, but unfortunately it was unsuccessful. But it's really nice to see interest from artists to this problem. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Like not only experts interested in this topic.
If I can add something very quick, if it's possible, I think what we need to understand that ecological justice cannot be put in place if we don't have social and economical justice. So in the sense that it doesn't matter if we can choose, if we have many different type of meat, and we have meat or vegetables that are organic, and they have a certain conscious, social, ecological, we need to understand if we don't have economical justice, it's impossible to access those products. So this is why I think that this idea of we can choose, it really depends on economical background, and this is something that needs to be put into the equation.
Mm-hmm. But that is also something that I would like to now make a short input before we open the discussion to the audience very shortly, because we're running out of time. In my research for the exhibition Land for Us All, it surprised me that as a farmer in Austria, I was told, and probably in many other places as well, if he has to actually acquire new agricultural land, will in his lifespan not be able to recover this investment with the sole production of a product that we actually really need to survive. And this, it seems strange to me that an economy that is so vital for us can only live because it's heavily subsidized. This in connection with a steady reduction of land, or this leads to the steady reduction of agricultural land, and in Austria we're losing 35 square meters of agricultural land every second that we're sitting here. And that has a lot to do with the fact that any kind of other use in connection with this land brings more money than agriculture. Which then in turn leads to the land grabbing in the lower and middle income countries because we do need the food. Maybe I do pose it as a question, how do we get out of this spiral, of this economic spiral actually? Does anyone have an idea how this could be possible?
Yeah, we need to start paying food at the price that the really cost of food. Right now we're paying nothing for food.
So subsidize the consumers instead of the agriculture.
I mean, we need to reward the good practices. We need to start also, for example, these big supermarket chains. They take a huge margins on the food. We need to start, and this is, I don't want to sound like a crazy hippie, but we live in a system, in a capitalist system that has worked very well until a certain time, but now we're seeing the consequences of that. What is the new system we need to put in place? I have no idea. What is clear, and this is not me, even the most conservative, they say, yes, the capitalistic system has arrived to its limits. We cannot keep pumping from everywhere just to make wealth. So, and of course, I don't have the answer. Yes, some people maybe think, but we need to look into that, and we need to stop thinking that we need to protect this capitalistic system, and the way it's doing it, that now is not a capitalistic system. Now it's becoming almost a corporate fascism. This is where we're going. If we see Apple, Google, Carrefour, all these companies. So we need to start thinking, it's not about protecting the capitalistic system, it's about protecting and making the changes that is necessary to get rid of this system. Which one? Some people are putting things in places that work, a small scale, of course, but we need to look into that. And I think right now, all the energy is invested in preserving our way of life. And our way of life need to stop as it is. I'm sorry, and this is facts. This is not something, any conspiracy idea.
I think we have time for one more speaker. Elena, you would like to put in a word?
Sorry, I couldn't find the mic. No, I actually agree very much with Mathieu, and I think this devastation that we are seeing not only in the fact that some capitalist words are collapsing, but in the fact that the land is just carrying this destruction and these traces. They are just the urgent call. We just have to act. There is nothing else to do, and this hypocrisy of thinking that, yeah, we are talking about getting more environmental, we're doing it, but it's true, it's just serving the corporations again. So yeah, I don't have so much to add because this time I agree with Mathieu.
Would you like to, maybe each of you can still add a sentence or two, and then unfortunately I have to wrap this discussion up because we're running out of time.
Yeah, thank you. I think we are at an economic discussion, and it was mentioned. We should pay the correct prices for this cheap, because the cost of producing it are put off the label. They are externalized, they are not internalized. And when we have the right prices for carbon emission, when we have the right prices for the externalities associated with food production, food will be more expensive. And this will hurt, of course, many people. So we need to recycle the revenues that come from the taxes on CO2 to those who wouldn't be able to afford food, which is an elementary need of any one of us. And that's what I hope will be done in the eco-social tax reform that is going underway right now in Austria.
Maybe another way is just to change the way we produce food and how much wasted food we produce. So I think we need to think not about how we will keep with the system and give that subvention to the other people, but how we can get rid of this system as soon as possible. Of course, this needs to take time. We cannot do it right away, but I think this is what we need to change. Yeah, it is about changing the way we produce and consume food.
And how we can learn from these experiences, like these agroecological communities. And I want to mention again Surimadi Kura in Mali, initiated by Buba Touré, as a fantastic example. Of course, a political, socialist example, but more than anything else, an example of how we can make it sustainable, how we can live with nature and not just extract, but collaborate. And so also how we have to take care of our garden and not just always fly things from here and there, but do also in our small responsibility as citizens a lot, and not just as consumers, but also as imaginative resources. So going back to the soil and healing with it by collaborating with it instead of just receiving the fruits that have been exploited from it.
Mikhailo, would you like to have the last word?
Yeah, I'm just thinking around your question, and it's quite a complex question, and for now I'm standing on ideas that maybe organic or bioagriculture can help with to avoid soil degradation in some way, but it's not. Someone says that it's not a decision for like all soils, let's say, but it might be one of the ways to save our soils and be healthy and
the quality of the soils.
And as I said, in organization we are pushing this idea to support small farmers, even individual farmers and we hope that they will be more environmental responsible than big producer of food. So we are really rely on this transformation from large-scale production of food to more smaller ones, and it can maybe helps with reducing of food waste as well.
Thank you so much at that point. Thank you to all the panelists for joining us today. Thank you for the lectures. Unfortunately, I couldn't open up this discussion to the audience, but it would be unfair towards the next panel if I took any longer. So we have a break now until 5:15, when we will rejoin together for the fourth panel with the name Natural Technologies, which will be chaired by Aziza Hamel. Looking forward to seeing you again later.